Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at CinemaBlend, with a spoiler-filled review of the new Star Wars film, The Rise of Skywalker. As you guys know, this is the conclusion to the saga that started way back in 1977 with the original Star Wars film, A New Hope. So J.J. Abrams was tasked with sticking the landing and bringing the entire saga to a conclusion, and we're going to explain to you whether we think he actually did it or not. Before we dive into the review, I want you guys to go down and hit subscribe, turn on your notifications so that every time we post a video here on CinemaBlend's YouTube page, you guys will be the first ones to hear about it. For real, guys, if you missed me saying this is going to be loaded with spoilers. I'm getting into every single spoiler for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, so if you haven't yet seen the film, turn around, go back. You do not want to hear all this. Everyone else ready? Let's go.
Long have I waited. And now, you're coming together.
There are a ton of expectations for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and I want to start off with the things that it does really well in a section I'm going to call the good. Naturally, this thing delivers on wall-to-wall Star Wars action. There's no denying the fact that J.J. Abrams knows how to make a science fiction movie. People may debate about the quality of his two Star Trek films, about whether they are Star Trek-y enough, but J.J. knows how to work his way around a blockbuster tentpole summer action type film, and the one thing about Rise of Skywalker is from the minute that it kicks off, it is wall-to-wall action. It's never not moving forward towards some type of goal, and I think it gets bonus points for delivering some of the most big screen, epically plotted action choreography that I've ever seen in a Star Wars movie. It takes full advantage of all the technology that's available to JJ and his team, and I have no doubt that people who want to go and just see big, bombastic science fiction Star Wars action are going to leave very, very satisfied. In the good category, I also want to single out the performances. I kind of mentioned that The Rise of Skywalker reminds me a bit of the Return of the Jedi of this new trilogy, in the fact that by the time we reach the third chapter, the characters and the actors are all really confident in who they are supposed to be, so they're able to really dive into their characters, explore different nuances of them, and deliver what I think are some of the best performances in this most recent trilogy. Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver specifically work out some of the complications that are found in Rey and Kylo Ren, giving them both opportunities to shine as their character arcs come to a conclusion.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
I do.
I also want to mention that J.J. Abrams and his team have really hit the ball out of the park when it comes to new droids and new creatures. That's what we want in our Star Wars universe as we bounce around from planet to planet on all of these new adventures with the characters that we have come to know from the previous two films. We meet a lot of new, really exciting droids and creatures, my favorite of which being Babu Frick, a droid smith who is going to maybe not quite steal the fan base away that the way that Baby Yoda did, but is still going to be a highlight when people come out of The Rise of Skywalker and talk about the new creatures that we got to meet in this world. Now it's time to transition to the bad, so don't hate me. I'm going to start with the script, which is credited to Chris Terrio and a team of writers, and unfortunately, the whole thing just kind of makes no sense. It chooses specifically not to build on the actions of The Last Jedi, and I understand that's a choice that JJ and his team wanted to make. It's almost as if he wanted to make a sequel that builds directly off of The Force Awakens, which is the last movie that J.J. Abrams did, and kind of ignore what Rian Johnson pushed forward in the Star Wars narrative and just sort of pick up from their own spot. Specifically to the point where you can say that, like, at the end of The Last Jedi, the First Order kind of had the rebellion on the run, and when this movie picks up, the First Order is not really all that strong, and instead they're deferring to Palpatine. So let's get to Palpatine for a second. It makes sense to a certain extent why you'd want to bring him back as the big bad of the trilogy, because he's one of the biggest villains that Star Wars has had outside of Darth Vader, and the fact that he was pulling the strings on Darth Vader almost the entire time, as established by the prequel trilogy.
Do it.
Again, I understand why JJ wants to bring him back. However, the script is so thin and devoid of explanation, we get no reason as to why Palpatine is back. He just kind of is, and we don't really know 100% what his plan is. We just sort of know that he's a villain, and so the heroes that we've come to know from Force Awakens and Last Jedi have to unite together to sort of bring them down. It is a little bit strange that the way that this trilogy has been established the main heroes who you think we should be following, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, General Leia, they've all been relegated to the backgrounds or eliminated entirely. If you remember, Han was killed off in Force Awakens, Luke was killed off in The Last Jedi, and this was supposed to be a Leia story from everything we understood, but the passing of Carrie Fisher meant they had to sort of rework their story and come at it from a different angle. Because of this, we have Rey and Finn and Poe going up against Palpatine, and he really shouldn't matter to these characters. He's not that important to their story, or hasn't been for 2 movies, when all of a sudden he's thrust on us by the screenplay as the villain that everyone's supposed to be concerned about. And because it almost feels like they knew that that wasn't a good enough reason to bring Palpatine back, we have to make him a family member of Rey, because everybody in the Star Wars universe has to be connected through blood somehow, otherwise they're just not important enough to pay attention to. Instead of laying out a proper conclusion for everybody who we've come to care about in this new trilogy and also in the larger saga, the whole movie is basically having us chase after MacGuffins that end up becoming not that important. There's a dagger first that Rey has to find because it has etchings in it that are going to point them to the next MacGuffin, which is a Sith Wayfinder, which is a pyramid thing that people have to go find for some reason whatsoever, and we're only concerned about these things for the 20 or 30 minutes it takes for the people on screen to find them. MacGuffins are the laziest ways to move an action film forward, and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker's screenplay unfortunately relies so heavily on all of them existing that by the time the movie ends, it's a lot of energy for nothing. Alright, we've done the good, we've done the bad, that means we have to do the ugly. And for this section, I'm going to just rail on Disney and Lucasfilm for what looks to be an utter lack of planning when it comes to this new trilogy of films. I don't quite understand why they turned over each chapter of the trilogy to new filmmakers without giving them an overarching story to which they were supposed to follow. Now that I've seen how all 3 of these films play out, it actively looks like the 3 individual films dislike each other fully and are constantly working at odds with what the previous film had set up. The Force Awakens, in my opinion, was an amazing way to kick off the return of Star Wars. Yes, it did copy A New Hope, and I understand that it sort of used that as a blueprint to introduce Star Wars back to a fandom that had been turned off by the prequel trilogy. However, the mysteries that were teased at the end of The Force Awakens, such as why was Luke Skywalker in exile and who are Rey's parents, really fascinating mysteries that I think JJ wanted to explore, were completely shuffled away by Rian Johnson, who essentially said from the opening scene of his movie, these things are not important. We're going to go in a totally different direction, and if you accept what Rian Johnson was suggesting to fans, there were some bold ways that the franchise could have gone moving forward. However, fandom pretty much largely rejected Rian Johnson's film, The Last Jedi, and so the new and final film, The Rise of Skywalker, seems to be a direct answer to what Rian Johnson did, ignoring and sweeping away everything that he set up to give us some of the safest, most predictable Star Wars plotting that I've seen in a movie to date. And so now when I sit back and think about it, it's just really baffling to me that this trilogy of films did not have someone with a steady hand at the forefront saying, this is the direction the story's going to go. Yes, you can pepper in a few things that bring your directorial voice, but we need to get to this destination. I don't want to really make the comparison to Avengers Endgame, which also brought a culmination to a longer running story and a multi-part story. But they were so effective in the way that they brought 23 films and one large story in the Infinity Saga to a close, giving satisfying conclusion to so many characters versus the 9 films of the Skywalker saga that needed to come to a close with The Rise of Skywalker. The difference being, the Star Wars films are 3 separate opposing trilogies that JJ somehow had to weave together into one film that sort of stuck the landing, whereas Kevin Feige over at Marvel, he knew for the course of 23 films where he wanted it all to conclude with the battle against Thanos, and he was able to bring all those characters together into it. I find it really ugly and really shocking that Star Wars went into the idea of a new trilogy of films without having an idea of where they wanted the story to go. At least a general format that these filmmakers could have followed. But now that I've seen how The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker play out, they are totally disconnected films that belong in a trilogy in name only and really don't work together as one cohesive story. Given everything I've had to say about Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, my ultimate grade on this has to be 2.5 stars out of 5. Not quite the finale that I was really hoping to get out of this last chapter of the Skywalker saga, and kind of a feeling of it's time to put Star Wars on the shelf for a little while, come back, reinvent yourself, give us something totally different. It's funny that like I've really been enjoying the Mandalorian series on the Disney Plus channel because it is something different. Yes, it feels like Star Wars, but it's characters that we have not met before on adventures that we haven't seen them go through, and by delivering something unique and different that still fits in the Star Wars universe, it doesn't feel beholden to our memories and the nostalgia that powers the Star Wars franchise forward. I want to see the next few Star Wars movies branch out and do their own thing, because by sticking to the Skywalker saga, this one did not land as smoothly as we had hoped. Now I want to hear from you guys. Maybe you completely disagree with me and you think that Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is one of the best chapters in the saga. I want to hear from you. I honestly do. We're going to have a serious discourse. I'm going to go into the comments and I'm going to answer most of you guys, providing this doesn't get out of hand. So go down to those comment section. Tell me what you thought about Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker as you head out to the theaters and see it. Believe me, I understand you need to go see it. I'm not telling you to avoid it in theaters. It's the end of an era. It's a Star Wars movie. We're going to go see it. I get it. But once you do, make sure you come back here, head to the comments, tell me what you thought about the new movie, tell me whether you agree with my review or not. While you're down there in the comments weighing in on Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, you're going to hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. How have you not done that already? We're posting videos like this all the time. We know you want to follow along with us, so do it by hitting subscribe and turning on your notifications.